Hello and welcome to Haunted Montreal's Spooky Story Sessions. I'm your host, Holly Rhiannon, and today I'm going to tell you all about Victorian Christmas ghost story traditions in Montreal. With over 350 documented ghost stories, Montreal is easily the most haunted city in Canada, if not all of North America. Haunted Montreal is dedicated to researching these paranormal tales, and our channel brings you new videos in both French and English every second Saturday. Today, we examine the Christmas Victorian ghost storytelling traditions in Montreal and throughout the British Empire and America. Telling tales of terror around a crackling fire was a very popular activity in the 19th century, long before the days that radio, television, and the internet came into being and almost snuffed out this beloved and ghostly tradition. But before we get into today's story, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notified every time we have a new tale to share. And hey, if you're already subscribed, thank you so much, and welcome back. We are happy to see you again. Now, without further ado, let's get spooky. During the Victorian era, there was a popular tradition of telling ghost stories all across the colonial British Empire, including in the city of Montreal. The origins of the Yuletide ghost story have little to do with the kind of commercial Christmas that has been celebrated since the Victorian age. These spooky tales reflect darker, ancient, and more fundamental issues, such as the winter solstice, death, rebirth, and the rapt connection between a ghost storyteller and his or her audience. However, being Victorian, they are packaged in the cozy trappings of the holiday. During Christmas seasons of the 19th and early 20th century, Montrealers celebrated the retelling of these deranged ghost stories with a hot glass of mulled brandy or wine by a warm, crackling fire in the hearth. The Victorian era was signified by the period of British Queen Victoria's reign from June 20th, 1837 until her death on January 22nd, 1901. The era was characterized as stuffy, uptight, and oppressive, with the expression "close your eyes and think of England" being offered to women to justify sexual reproduction and overly lusty men. The Victorian era was heavily influenced by oppressive patriarchal norms, but also romanticism and even mysticism in regards to religion, social values, and arts. While Victorians were often scientifically minded, they also had a deep love of magic and paranormal spectacles. Mediums and seances were extremely popular, as were hypnotism shows and other entertainment of this genre. During this time, Great Britain was embarking on a global campaign of imperial expansion, colonization, and domination, particularly in Asia and Africa. These militaristic actions made the British Empire the largest in human history. Infamously known as the Empire Where the Sun Never Sets, the imperial project resulted in destruction, death, and havoc for millions of people being colonized all across the world. At the same time, it spread the tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas internationally. The tradition of telling ghost stories during the Yuletide season is much older than the Victorian era, but peaked during that time. Telling ghost stories during the winter is a hallowed folk custom that stretches back centuries, when families would pass the frosty winter nights with tales of spooks, phantoms, and monsters. In Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, Mamelius proclaims, "A sad tale's better for winter. I have one of spirits and goblins." According to religious studies professor Justin Daniels at the University of Pennsylvania, Christmas as celebrated in Europe and the US was originally connected to the pagan winter solstice celebration and the festival known as Yule. The darkest day of the year was seen by many as a time when the dead would have particularly good access to the living. The Victorian era saw an explosion in ghost storytelling across the British Empire and USA, triggered by the 1843 invention of the industrial steam-powered rotary printing press. This impressive machine could produce millions of copies in a single day, making books much cheaper and more widely available. Ghost stories had traditionally been told in an oral form, but with the rotary printing press, publishers suddenly needed a mass of content. Ghost stories were seen as ideal because they were typically short, thematic, and popular, plus they could be edited quite easily to the required length. That same year, Charles Dickens wrote the most famous Christmas ghost story of all time, A Christmas Carol. First published in London by Chapman and Hall and illustrated by John Leach, A Christmas Carol recounts the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, an elderly miser who is visited by the ghost of his former business partner, Jacob Marley, and other spirits. The ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come terrify Scrooge, who, following an epiphany, is ultimately transformed into a kinder, gentler, and more altruistic man. Published on December 19, 1843, the first edition sold out by Christmas Eve. Acclaimed by critics as a masterpiece, by the end of 1844, 13 editions had been released. A Christmas Carol would go on to become the quintessential Christmas ghost story, giving us new idioms like dead as a doornail and you are walking like Tiny Tim, all the while popularizing the expression, God bless us everyone. Following its publication, Christmas ghost stories multiplied and became one of the most popular genres in print media during the Yuletide season. Indeed, Dickens decided to discontinue writing Christmas publications in 1868, complaining to his dear friend Charles Fector that he felt, as if I had murdered Christmas a number of years ago, perhaps I did, and its ghost perpetually haunted me. By that time, Christmas ghost stories had taken on a Frankenstein-like afterlife of their own, and many other writers rushed to fill the void that Dickens had left wide open. Meanwhile, in Victorian Montreal, there was no shortage of ghost storytelling during the Yuletide season. Indeed, Montrealers embraced the winter with fantastic carnivals that featured giant ice castles, mock battles involving hundreds of participants, skating parties at the opulent Victoria Rink, and magnificent fireworks displays. When revelers arrived home after a day at the winter carnival, the hearth was stoked, mulled wine and brandy were prepared, and Victorian Montrealers gathered around to listen to and tell ghost stories as the flames crackled, casting eerie shadows across so many a parlor throughout the city. There were plenty of popular ghost stories to be read from books throughout the British Empire, such as Casting the Runes by M.R. James, The Haunted Ceiling and the Red Room by H.G. Wells, Night Terrors, The Ghost Stories of E.F. Benson, The Three Impostors by Arthur Machen, and Uncle Silas, subtitled A Tale of Bartram Howe by Irish ghost story master Sheridan Lee Faneuil. In many cases, including in Montreal, local ghost stories were also told. The most popular ghost story in Montreal in the 19th century, and perhaps today, was the deranged legend of Simon McTavish, the spirit of a Scottish fur trader who was said to toboggan down Mount Royal in his own coffin, terrifying local residents. A Scottish immigrant to Montreal on the heels of the British conquest, Simon McTavish had taken over the fur trade from the French with his highly profitable Norwest Company. At the age of 46, he selected a beautiful 18-year-old French bride named Marie-Marguerite Chaboillet, and he moved with her to London, England, hoping to live out the rest of his days in luxurious bliss. However, she became seriously depressed and wanted to return to Montreal. McTavish complied, and when they arrived, he ordered the construction of a lavish castle on the slopes of Mount Royal. If he could not enjoy the luxuries of London, he would create them for himself. Using the finest materials available, such as hand-cut limestone blocks, the McTavish Castle was built in the style of the baronial estates in the Highlands of Scotland. It was to be a striking and luxurious building that could be seen from the city below, a glorious representation of the richest and most famous person of all, Simon McTavish. By 1804, the castle was almost finished. The foundations, walls, and roof were in place, and work was about to start installing windows and doors. McTavish, who was supervising work from a small cottage a few hundred yards to the west of the castle, stayed out in the rain one afternoon. He caught a cold. His doctor advised him to take some rest, but never one to listen to anybody but himself, McTavish continued overseeing the work in the damp weather. His cold quickly developed into pleurisy and pneumonia, and he died suddenly on July 6, 1804. The city was in shock, and an elaborate funeral was held on the grounds of the unfinished castle. A magnificent vault was built in the back of the garden where McTavish liked to read, and it was where he was interred. His grateful nephews erected a tall stone column in his memory as well, in honor of his manly virtues. Due to legal issues related to McTavish's estate and last will, construction of the castle was immediately abandoned. His wife quickly married another man, a certain young British soldier named Lieutenant Colonel William Smith Plenderleath. She moved happily back to England to raise another family, leaving McTavish to molder and decompose all alone in his vault. Over time, the castle took on a look of dilapidation as it slowly decayed and crumbled. Cattle wandered inside the ruin during the summer, and in the winter it took on an eerie appearance as snow drifted through it, gray, gloomy, and almost skull-like, its empty windows staring down at the city below. McGill University was founded in 1821, and it is said that McGill students would go to the vault in the winter wearing snowshoes and shout and holler to try and raise the ghost of McTavish. In 1827, the students went too far. The locks of the vault were smashed, and the interior of the tomb was violated. An indignant article appeared in the Gazette condemning the vandalism. The locksmith later reported that he felt a frightening presence in the vault and noticed McTavish's coffin had fallen on the floor, spilling its contents. Without venturing inside, he quickly repaired the lock and fled. It didn't take long before the castle was said to be haunted. Some people reported spirits flitting in and out of the doors and windows and horrible groaning noises coming from within the unfinished building, whereas others said that a ghost could be seen dancing on the roof. Even more strangely, it was said that McTavish himself could be seen on certain nights tobogganing down Montreal, not on a sled, but rather in his own coffin. In a publication called Once a Week, printed by Bradbury and Evans in London, England, the Montreal ghost story of Simon McTavish was released in Volume 6, December 1861 to June 1862. Titled Nips Démons, the deranged tale is clearly inspired by the McTavish ghost story that was being vividly told all around Victoria and Montreal, and indeed, ever since the fur baron's untimely death in 1804. To read Nips Démons, you can find it in the archives of Once a Week from pages 602 to 608. While the city of Montreal figuratively buried the McTavish ghost story by demolishing his crumbling castle in 1861 and using the rubble to literally bury his mausoleum, it never totally faded from the imaginations of Montrealers. It has been making a comeback since Haunted Montreal started resurrecting the story by doing in-depth research and offering ghost tours to his grave sites in 2011. But Haunted Montreal is not the only organization reviving old ghost storytelling traditions, which faded considerably with the invention of radio, TV, and the internet. Indeed, the world-famous Smithsonian Museum made a serious call to action to revive the Christmas ghost story tradition as reported by Irish Central. More locally, a Windsor, Ontario illustrator named Seth has been republishing Christmas ghost stories with a publishing company called Biblioasis. According to their website, reading a ghost story on Christmas Eve was once as much a part of traditional Christmas celebrations as turkey, eggnog, and Santa Claus. Biblioasis is thrilled to offer this series of beautifully illustrated collectible books that share these classic Christmas ghost stories with readers across North America. Seth, our world-famous and beloved cartoonist, illustrates each book in his own inimitable way. Trimmed to fit the coziest stocking, they're perfect gifts for those who want a bit of extra Christmas chill. There are also cultural remnants and reinterpretations of the old Christmas ghost storytelling tradition in Montreal. For example, a series called Urban Tales run by the Centaur Theatre was vaguely based on the Christmas tradition of telling horrible ghost stories. At one time set in early December, Urban Tales featured bizarre, comedic, disturbing, and deranged monologues delivered by local actors. Another Montreal Victorian Christmas option is to pay a visit to the Sir Georges Etienne Cartier National Historic Site, where an annual event called A Victorian Christmas at the Cartiers is held. The historic site invites guests to discover how styles dating back to 1867 are still in vogue 150 years later, be charmed by the elegant Victorian decor featuring miniature fir trees, handmade cards, and of course, champagne. On its website, the Sir Georges Etienne Cartier National Historic Site sets the scene. It's Christmas, 1867, the Confederation has just been formed, and festivities are in full swing at the Cartier home. All the latest trends in decoration, cooking, and fashion are sought out to delight the guests. During your visit to the house, discover the history and unexpected origins of some of our still current holiday traditions. If you're looking to go out with friends or need a break from December's hustle and bustle, come visit the Cartier house with its festive decorations. You can enjoy a hot drink by the fireplace, take a souvenir photo with charming period accessories, or make your own personalized holiday card. Guests can also fill the next year with love and happiness by kissing your good company beneath the traditional mistletoe and enjoy hot drinks by the fireplace. Unfortunately, while visitors can sit by a roaring Victorian fire with mulled wassail, it appears that Christmas ghost stories are not yet told at the Sir George Etienne Cartier National Historic Site. This is an unfortunate act, given that they certainly would have been told in 1867, when ghost stories were one of the most popular genres throughout the British Empire. To correct this unfortunate cultural gap, Haunted Montreal has held our own Victorian ghost storytelling events on and off through the years since 2019. And if you can't catch one this year, you can always rewatch our videos on this channel and read the blog by our founder Donovan King and enjoy plenty of spookiness yourself or with friends and family this Christmas. Are you a Montreal resident or perhaps a tourist who has experienced something strange and paranormal in this historic city? If so, we'd love to know. As always, we want to hear your theories on these subjects. Thank you for stopping by. If this is your first video, we do hope you'll stick around for the next one. We post videos in both French and English every second Saturday. If you'd like to learn more about the organization founded by the talented Donovan King, it's all listed in the description down below, along with links to purchase tickets to in-person haunted storytelling tours. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'll have a new video out in a couple weeks, but until then, stay spooky.